Good afternoon. It's Friday, the 24th of March, 2017, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson. Joining me today, we have David Scott, as usual, on a Friday, and also Abby Reardon from Ardsia. We'll be covering some of the issues from there a little later on. But we're going to begin straight away, David, with two new arrests made in connection with the London attack. Obviously, we haven't spoken to you since this took place. So what were your thoughts on the overall event and what's happened since?
Well, this article here is just giving a little update on the sort of latest news. The suspect has been, or the perpetrator has been named Adrian Russell Adjao or Jail, and other arrests have been made, and it's an update on where we're at. We also have some information in the Telegraph on the background story of this man, which involves a lot of violence and some quite strange descriptions in the Telegraph of the violence in his past, and the fact that he was radicalized in the prison system.
Yeah, well, we'll be coming on to that. But let's have a look at this one, because this is really going to be the talking point here. Tommy Robinson condemned for ranting about Islamic extremism at the scene of the London terror attack. And David, it seems to me that the focus on Islamic extremism is perhaps, we have to accept that it's there, that it's taking place and so on, but perhaps we need to take a broader view of what's going on. What were your thoughts about what Tommy Robinson said?
Yes, Tommy Robinson is always worth listening to, and I saw the quote unquote rant and what he was saying. And what he was saying obviously came from his experience. A lot of it was correct. But I was left feeling that there was more to the story, that what you're seeing is only what he was talking about is part of it, but by no means the big picture. So we had here, we've got a man here who has experienced at the very sharp end in places like Luton and in the prison system, the nature of the most extreme forms of Wahhabi-led Islamic extremism that is in this country, and the fact that it's not compatible with Britain, it's not compatible with the British, and he's talking about that, and he's correct to talk about that, but I feel there's much more to be said. I talked to my Pakistani friends in Glasgow, Scots Pakistani friends in Glasgow, about this and about the problems that they're facing in terms of culture, in terms of identity, in terms of who they are. And I think, looking at it from their point of view, they're in a horrible position, because they're in a country. Britain has got serious problems. We're very, very badly led. We'll come on to that, I think, more. We have a problem where there's a breakdown in morality, and we have a serious society-wide problem, because society and the foundations of our society, family, church, faith, the relationship between employers and employees, all the things that used to stabilize the country, that used to bind us together, have all been under attack for decades. And we're seeing the effects of that in a society that no longer has any sure idea of itself. And then we've brought people in, been invited in, let's not forget, from different cultures. They've come into this as our own culture, as our own identity has rather fallen apart. And then they're being influenced by some of the most extreme Wahhabist preaching, often through the mosques, not always. And they've got to kind of make sense of this. I think it's an invidious position for them to be in. And I think I talk to them, and I sense fear. They're frightened that there'll be a backlash based on terrorist events like the one this week in London. But they're also frightened of the extremists within their own ranks. And they realize how dangerous these people are. And I think what we've got to do is find a way where the other voices from that community can be heard, and we can start to work out ways of winning the war of ideas that at the moment we appear to be losing.
I mean, I think the thing that concerns me slightly about the focus on the focus on Islamic extremism and ignore everything else that's going on is that what you're looking at is a symptom and not the disease. And just to give a bit of substance to what I'm saying, and then I'll ask you for comment on this. If we look at what's going on in Syria at the moment, Mother Agnes, wonderful woman, but she's tweeting out, Syria is burning, Damascus, Hama, other provinces are burning, but mainstream media praise insurgents in Syria. But then she's asking, wasn't it an insurgent that attacked London? And she's saying that lies protect terror. And it's the protection of terror by the mainstream media, which is one of the things which kind of falls under the radar when we focus on only on Islamic extremism and ignore everything else that's going on. But what's going on in Syria at the moment is that 4 or 5 new ISIS fronts have been created in the last couple of weeks, just coincidentally, I say with slight irony or sarcasm perhaps, just coincidentally with the US boots on the ground invasion of Syria. And so it was clearly all timed to take place at the same time. And of course, this is part of what is generating this extremism in the first place. There's the fact that we bombed Iraq into the Stone Age, and we continue to kill civilians in that country. So another 200 dead as a result of US-led airstrikes on Mosul. There is the mass migration of people, which is causing tension and also needs to be discussed because, of course, what we have discovered, and we're going to be producing quite a lot more on this in the coming weeks. What we've discovered, and you discussed this last week on this program, David, the fact that, of course, we bombed Libya into the Stone Age as well, that there is a huge industry moving people has built up, and in fact, what the BBC was acknowledging this morning on the Today program this morning was that the Libyans are relying on people trafficking as a source of income. So we are trafficking people to degrees that we have never seen before. And again, we have evidence of people trafficking and particularly child trafficking happening from Syria, involving organisations which have been supported by the British government to the tune of multiple millions of pounds. And we're going to be discussing that in much more detail in the coming days and weeks. So this is contributing to the problem as well. And as you said, this Telegraph headline, first picture of London terrorist, how Khalid Masood went from football-loving teenager to Westminster attacker. And what they're pointing out in this article is that he was radicalised within the prison system. And again, this is something that the UK column has been highlighting for quite a long time, because within the prison system, we have the whole common purpose apparatus. We have a pretty disgusting regime in many prisons in this country, and people have nowhere to go. And as we discussed before the program, David, people are converting to Islam in prison just to avoid being beaten up or worse. So taking that as a whole, we have got to say that we as a people are contributing significantly to our own demise, if our own demise is going to be at the hands of Islamic extremism. Do you think that's unfair?
No, I don't think it's unfair at all. The Libyan situation seemed to be the most extreme form of arrogance, that if we bomb and strafe a country and we take them out, then something will flower that we can presumably profit from. That was, I would imagine, the reason it was done. They do have oil. You're taking a country that was quite poor. Before they discovered oil, the major export from Libya was scrap iron from dragging World War II tanks out of the desert. But was stable and was peaceful. And whatever you think about the leader they had, people could go about their everyday lives and not be bothered too much. It's the arrogance we seem to have that the oppressive regime that we have in the West, increasingly oppressive regime that we have in the West, is somehow still a shining beacon of liberty. So much so that we can destroy other nations to make them more like us. And there is a backlash for that. And there is a not only a moral cancer within our country, but it is most obvious at the very highest levels. It's most obvious in the top echelons of government, because power tends to attract the worst elements of a society. One of the problems of a system which has got so much centralized power as our system does now is you tend to have evil taking over that centralized power and using it for its own purposes. And then you have all the war on truth that we have going on. One of the things that the extremists point at is they point at places like Yemen, and they point at actions by Western governments, and they say, well, this is terrorism because you see the dead children, the dead women. This is terrorism every bit as much as what we are doing, and they have a point. The intervention into Iraq was mad and was monstrous, and it was preceded by sanctions which cost 500,000 Iraqi children's lives, but that was worth it according to Madeleine Albright. And the intervention into Libya was every bit as bad, and we seem to be generating problems, and we are, to some extent, simply being caught in the backlash. All the way through, you can trace the origins of this to Western political policy.
Absolutely. So it is by design. Now, earlier on, we were discussing this, and the question was, well, what do we do about it? Perhaps the first thing we do is actually hold some people to account for some of the actions that we have taken in recent decades or recent years.
Yes, never miss an opportunity to tell the truth is a starting point. You have to get some truth in there. We have to be honest about, for example, what the Blair government did. We have to be honest about the position that the Asian and Pakistani communities that we've invited to come and live in our country are in, and we have to be honest with them about how how we can all live together.
Wouldn't an honest appreciation of what happened with Iraq in particular, wouldn't an honest way to tell the truth there be to perhaps arrest Tony Blair and hold him to account for in a court of law for what he did?
I think it was inexcusable, because they decided before that they were going to war. They decided before they were going to war. I actually don't know why Blair did that. To this day, I don't know why he did it. Did he not have, after 2001, after 9/11, did he not have the political vision, the political gumption to actually say, no, we are not going to follow the United States into this? Or was it other things? Was it blackmail? Was it the whole, how do you control politicians? Well, it's often done through videos of child rape and things like this. Was there something like that going on in the background with his government? Why did they do it? I to this day, I don't understand that calculation, because it was monstrous at the time. It was clearly going to be generating huge numbers of dead bodies and strife and international level movements of people, and catastrophic events would flow from it. And it was clear back then. It was clear, and he did it anyway. And the decision was nothing to do with weapons of mass destruction. He lied to Parliament. He lied to the people of this country. And yes, I would like to see him tried for that.
But these are the people that are going to solve all the problems for us. I don't think I need to say any more than just to look at that image. And the mainstream media, absolutely part and parcel of the problem.
Rule by the worst. Kakistocracy is what it's called. Rule by the worst.
Absolutely. The media, right at the centre of this as well. This is the Mail's front page from today. Yesterday, it took the Mail 2 minutes on the web to find a terror manual on how to use a car for mass murder. I'm sorry, David, but do you need a manual for that?
No, man,
No. Google the terrorist friend. So Google is the terrorist friend. So what the Mail is doing here is propagandizing for the idea that we've got to censor the internet because there are manuals on the internet which tell you how to drive a car into some people. Okay, but perhaps the ultimate stupidity, and perhaps not surprisingly, goes to Louise Mensch. Because apparently Russia has been running active measures all over the EU involving Islamic extremists they train and fund.
there are really few words to describe the stupidity that is Louise Mensch. I mean, the Russians hacked our country again. It's always the Russians. It's actually quite breathtakingly stupid.
Yes. Okay, well, look, David, let's just mention this. Bomb threats again rattle Jewish centers. This is from the United States. What's the background to this?
There's been a whole series of bomb threats against Jewish organizations and Jewish institutions. It's been running for weeks, months maybe, and it's been discussed at political level because the suggestion is it's Trump slash Brexit slash we live in a harsher world, and look, Trump has come and he's won an election, and now everyone's turned into anti-Semites. And that was the left-wing narrative here, that what we're seeing when people ask or tell the truth or ask the right questions, you're called names. So you're an anti-Semite, you're a misogynist, you're a transphobic, homophobic. You've got the usual sort of list of insult names. And this is to close down discussion. This is to stop people asking the right questions because it makes them afraid to ask the right questions. And it was interesting to see that when they actually did get to the bottom of who was phoning in at least the majority of the terror threats, it was in fact an American-Israeli Jew operating from Ashkelon, I think he was in, with voice disguising software. And he was phoning in these terror threats himself. And it wasn't anything to do with America being more racist, with America suddenly becoming anti-Semitic. None of the things that were being suggested was going on here were actually going on. What we had, I don't know what the motivation of this man was, but we had an individual doing some very strange things. But he wasn't even an individual from a different community. He was an American Jew himself.
Well, if we just look at that Haaretz article here, an analysis, bomb threat suspect's identity embarrassing for Jews, but ultimately a relief. It may be a blow to Jewish pride and a political black eye to those who blamed the Trump camp for the threats. But this means that a fearful Jewish community can finally exhale. But the thing that put a real wry smile on my face was the next line, which said, "Is there anything worse than conspiracy theorists appearing to be right?"
Yes. The conspiracy theorists are getting better and better, it would seem. It used to be, a suggestion that you're wearing a tinfoil hat, but now it seems to be a claim that you're going to be proved right in about 3 weeks.
Yes. Okay, David, let's move on to Artesia then. So you take it away.
Well, let's introduce Abby into events here. Good afternoon, Abby. How are you today?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. What I'd like to cover here is if we could just briefly describe for viewers what's been happening at Artesia, just the overview, and then I want to delve into how the community has been fighting back and the community has been starting to hold people to account and ask the right questions. So, first of all, if you could just give us a brief overview of what the dispute is at Artesia.
Well, Scottish Water are trying to build a new wastewater treatment works right next to Fort George. And they're doing this to basically connect a new town, Tornagreen, up to the waste treatment works. This is causing massive disruption in our little community. We've got a small community. The pipe has to go through right at the front, so it's digging through people's gardens. and it's been very distressing. At the moment, they've only got planning permission to take the waste treatment plant to treat up to 8,000, just under 9,000 population equivalent, but they want to take it up to 58,000 population equivalent. So we're looking at this getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So we're really just trying to fight this whole thing to make sure that we can keep our beautiful area as beautiful as it is.
Now, one of the strange aspects, and I was involved in this, helping one of the local landowners, house owners, property owners, defend their rights. One of the strange aspects of this was some of the land that the pipe goes through is private land, and Scottish Water are in denial on this, and they're trying to claim that it's somehow public land and not ask permission. So that's been this first slide up here, Mike, shows a notice that we sent to Scottish Water on behalf of the owners, and to make it clear who owns the land. So this was a case of using common law approaches, serving notice on people where you think there's a dispute coming, and starting a dialogue. And that got an initial response from the Scottish Water lawyers that, oh no, you're wrong. But as we've discussed it with them, it's been quite clear that the property owners here are absolutely correct. They have title deeds, and Scottish Water's attempt to charge through their land is not going well. Could you sort of discuss a wee bit about how the sort of rights of the locals are being trampled or attempted to be trampled by Scottish Water? What's the approach and the sort of style of Scottish Water that you're dealing with?
It's fairly consistent. For that particular couple, this has been really stressful. They clearly have title deeds to the land, and they have tried pretty much everything. Saying, oh, you don't own it because you've not occupied the path. Just because you own a bit of land and you have deeds to land doesn't mean you occupy every bit of it. And we find that with everything. At the moment, there's 4 land issues where the pipeline needs to go through. There's 4 people that have objected, and they've all, had varying kind of conversations with Scottish Water, and it's extremely stressful. But this particular couple have really been through the mill, and actually it was yourselves that served notice on Scottish Water. Scottish Water didn't serve notice on them, and they have neighbours, and I think they have no intention of serving anybody notice, just going through the land despite them people having title deeds to it.
Yes, Mike, if you could maybe fire right through to the last of those lists, you'll get a response from the Scottish Government regarding this. That's the one. Yes, this is an acknowledgement that the matter. So we served notice on Scottish Water, and the discussion started, and at that point the campaign also got local politicians involved. They got the local press involved, and started to raise the issues. Now, the issues are ones of land ownership, the issues are one of safety, road safety, etc., and the general lack of rigor that the planning process has been employed using. Everything seems to be a bit slipshots, already rushed, and the result is that the community's been inconvenienced in many ways. So the efforts by the Ardersier Foundation to advertise and to make people aware of this problem has had some effect, because what this letter shows is that it's now been handled at ministerial level in the Scottish Government. So you're obviously getting noticed.
I mean, there's a real lack of transparency with all their paperwork. We're asking for documents, and we're getting stonewalled. We're doing freedom of information requests, and we're really trying to, sort of build up the picture as to when this decision was actually made for this waste treatment works to come here. Now, officially, it was December 2007, but we found documentation and Adesina being mentioned way before that in 2006 even. And it just shows that there was no proper process, and the way the decision was actually made in December 2007 has to raise some really serious questions about the people that did the document, and the way they did it as well, you know, to decide Adesina was a place. I mean, the stakeholder meeting was actually called Adesina Waste Treatment Works, as it was looking for a place for the waste treatment works to go. You know, I think that's a little hint that it wasn't, you know, it wasn't impartial.
Yes, yes. So the decision, the fix was in with the decision it would see. And you're now fighting. It's got planning permission. And one of the aspects here is what sort of response are you getting from the Highland Council? Because they're obviously they've got a quasi judicial role here. They've got to administer the planning process, and there's quite a lot of authority and power vested in the planning authority to make decisions. So do you feel that the Highland Council is being an impartial referee on the pitch for you here?
Absolutely not. No, we can't even get a response from the Highland Council about documents that they have, let alone Scottish Water. You know, every time we bring up an issue and we're saying, right, okay, this is a problem, you know, Highland Council going straight to defend Scottish Water. They're not being impartial. If anything, as we've gone through the documentation, they've almost been acting as one, not as, you know, Scottish Water being an applicant for a planning, you know, for planning permission. They have really, in my opinion, bent the rules to make them be able to do what they're doing here.
What we're looking at here is a very similar situation to, for example, fracking policy or the situation with the Bundys in the USA, where local authorities and corporations are collaborating to trample on people's rights.
That's exactly it, Mike. That's the bigger picture, is that you have a situation where the community's united against this. There's no attempt to either recognise that or even meet people halfway and find a solution that will satisfy the local community. The attitude is rather, well, if we admit that you, the local people who actually live here, have any say in the matter here, then it's going to open a can of worms, because in all the other developments we're doing all across Scotland, then communities will start to think that they've got some rights and have a say there too. We don't want to have anything like that happening, because we are in charge. It's a very authoritarian view, and the community is the people who've got to live with it. You know, they've got to pick up the pieces at the end of the day and live with it. And the idea that people like the Highland Council are their servants and are only operating in their best interests is once again shown to be sadly not true.
Okay, Abby, so what's next?
We are just continuing to fight. We're now going over the whole decision-making process, and there is some serious flaws in that, you know. And as I say, there's 4 landowners that are currently refusing Scottish Water permission to lay the pipe through their land. And really, it's what happens there next, you know, how that's kind of seen. I mean, one of them, clearly, they're claiming that they don't own the land despite them having title deeds. So for them, it's a very scary kind of situation just now when you have legal deeds to land, and, you know, despite you being able to prove that, they're still railroading through saying, no, we don't need to, you know, gain your permission because we're claiming you don't own the land, despite them having every bit of paperwork that shows that they do. So at the moment, it's quite scary territory for everybody in our community, you know, and we'll just have to see what happens.
Okay.
You have, Abby, had quite a lot of support from the local community policeman, though. He seems to be upholding the law. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, the police have been absolutely fantastic. They have remained impartial. But we've been able to go to them with questions, and especially with this particular issue, you know, he has said that without their written permission, they will remove them. You know, if they haven't got the permission of the landowner and they start to carry out work on their land, they will be removed. and I hope that happens.
So it's a fight for property rights and for the ability of communities to influence their elected officials that are meant to serve them, and we'll hear more in the weeks and months to come. Thank you very much, Abby.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, David, let's move on to Scottish issues. The SNP should do a Hammond, a U-turn, over the named person scheme, and this is according to Jim Sillars.
Yes, Jim Sillars was speaking at an event on Monday, organised by Notre Dame Person Campaign, and it's quite interesting. So you've got the former deputy head of the SNP and the man who very famously won the Govan by-election for the SNP, speaking out very strongly and extremely eloquently against the named person scheme, and he made I think 3 extremely telling points. Firstly, that the political maturity that was shown by the Conservatives in realising that they'd made an enormous mistake over the budget and just ditch it, just don't do that, ditch it, is something that the excuse me, the current SNP administration in Scotland can't muster, because they always have to be right. There can be no turning back. There's only one way, and it's our way. Secondly, he made the point that the quality of the debate in Parliament, in the Scottish Parliament in Holyrood, is extremely poor. That the Parliament only sits for very limited hours, and speeches and interventions from the members are very limited as to time. This is to make it child friendly. This is to make it women friendly. This is all good social justice warrior stuff. And of course, what it means is it doesn't work properly as a parliament. Things are not being scrutinised correctly. And he said he was absolutely astounded when he saw what was actually in the GIRFEC legislation in the 2014 Children and Young People's Act. He said he said that under no circumstances would that have ever got through Westminster, because the standard of scrutiny at Westminster is so much higher. So here you have a major problem over the nature and quality of what's happening at Holyrood. And the third point he made was, how are decisions really being made? And they're being made now by 3 people: Nicola Sturgeon, Peter Murrell, her husband, and the deputy leader, John Swinney. And that's what's running Scotland, those 3 people. And there is
sorry.
other.
What role does Nicola Sturgeon's husband play in Scottish politics?
He's chairman of the party.
Does he have any position in the government?
No, none.
Okay.
So he's chairman of the party. The party is the party. And Jim Sillars, SNP grandee, and I mean, you're talking about a man who's got traditional left-wing views, and obviously supports Scottish independence. That's been his life's career, and he's talking about the Stalinist aspects of how the party that he joined and loved is now being run. He used the word Stalinist, and this keeps coming up. And it's not because people are trying to tar them as Nazis. It reflects how the small clique that's running the SNP is actually behaving. And there now seems to be 2 SNPs. There's as we interact with people who share the basic aspiration for an independent Scotland, they come in 2 types. They come in people who are reasonable, who want to discuss the issues, who appreciate the real challenges that would lie ahead for an independent Scotland, and have a realistic view as to what it will take to make a nation, and make a nation that works and can provide the necessary support for its people. And you have got the other aspect of it, who are the true believers, who will brook no argument and no discussion, and who, if you ask any questions, immediately throw insults and invective and call you Ewan and Uncle Tam and all of this. And it's very, very hostile and toxic. And I really don't know where it's come from, because it's very un-Scottish way of behaving.
Okay. Okay, thanks, David. I'm going to play a short video clip now. This was made by Theresa May before the terror attack, because she has a plan for Britain, apparently. And I'm just going to play the first few seconds of this, and then we'll have a discussion about it briefly. So let's see what she had to say.
The government I lead faces an important task as we negotiate our departure from the European Union. But our vision and ambition is bigger than that. Because last summer's referendum was not just a vote to leave the EU, it was an instruction to change the way our whole country works, and the people for whom it works, forever. It was a call to make Britain a country that works for everyone, not just the privileged few. And I want the United Kingdom to emerge from this period of national change, stronger, fairer, more united, and more outward-looking than ever before.
So, David, did you know that the referendum over whether we stay within the European Union or not was a call for such massive change? Did you appreciate that? Was there some hint within the wording of the referendum question that would be the case?
No, that one passed me by. The suggestion that we are talking about huge national change, I kind of see where she's going, because the EU and allegiance to the EU and policy set by the EU fundamentally affected our country. And what the vote was to cut that off, to extricate ourselves from that. And yes, there are wider implications as to what then will happen, in that there will be further changes. But there was no indication in the vote as to in what direction those further changes should take, none at all. If it was anything, it was to say the people saying that we want maybe a little less government. We want to be able to manage ourselves as a country, manage ourselves as a people. But you'd have to be very, very cautious to extrapolate from the simple statement that we want out of the EU to an entire policy agenda. And I rather suspect that policy agenda was sitting on the shelf ready to go anyway.
Well, I'm going to say that it wasn't ready to go. It was already in progress. She's talking about a fairer society. Now, if you have a look at the UK Column website, you'll find a couple of articles on this issue of fairness and the fair society, and also an article on Theresa May's shared society and where that policy agenda may have come from in the first place. In fact, it's not where it may have come from, it's where it definitely came from, which was the Club de Madrid. But let's look at fairness in Britain, because just take 0 hours contracts as an example, David. Since 2012, it has grown, the number of 0 hours contracts have grown exponentially. And what we're looking at here is almost 1 million people in this country on a 0 hours contract. That's a spectacular change in the employment sort of regime that we see in this country.
We talked earlier about the attack that's been going on in the country, and the fact that the things that cement us together as a nation have been attacked. So first and foremost, it's the family. The church is obviously, for all practical purposes, a thing of the past now. And one of the other aspects is the relationship between employer and employed. Now, that's been eroded over the years in many different ways, an awful lot of it via the tax system, because it is now so difficult to employ someone, it's so costly to employ someone. It's also through, paradoxically, the education system, because it's very difficult to find people who are capable, hardworking, and employable in our country, and that comes from the failure of education. And in many ways, if you're a small business owner and you want to become poor, the quickest way to achieve that is to offer someone a job, and it should not be that way. And as a result of this attack on the relationship between an employer and an employee, you're now finding that the the response eventually is the 0 hours contract. So there is no relationship. And if you look back at, say, the heyday of Glasgow, when it was the industrial capital of the empire, and you look at how the large organisations that inhabited that city and employed the million people who lived there actually operated, they generated vast social opportunities for all of their staff. Right, there was sports clubs, there was all sorts of clubs. There was the social life was hugely linked to the employer, and the employer did a vast amount of things which are now been taken on by the government, and he did them in order to maintain his own business and maintain his workforce and make sure that people were happy, and he kept good people, and simply because the people very much organised themselves into clubs and societies and all the rest of it. And you had a tremendous centre of society centred on the workplace, and it's gone.
Yes. Okay, well, of course, the other aspect of how Theresa May is bringing us all closer together is to split us all apart, and devolution is the heart of that. And of course, you in Scotland are experiencing that, but we're not just talking about national devolution here, we're talking about devolution at every level. And this is the latest one. Now, there are a lot of devolution events going on in Manchester during this week, because obviously we're in the run-up to the election of the Metropolitan Mayor. And this is but it has to be said, this particular aspect of devolution, this particular event around this particular aspect of devolution isn't on the Eventbrite website, which is listing most of the other devolution events. This is about justice devolution. And they're saying here that the devolution of justice event in Manchester this week. For those of us interested in public policy, when we hear mention of Manchester, our first thought over the last year or so has tended to be devolution. While devolution is in health and social care is now well established, justice devolution is still at an early stage of development. While we know the outline of the Justice Devolution Agreement in Manchester, its implications have yet to become clear, and they discuss what justice devolution is. And at this point in time, they're talking mainly about things like commissioning of offender management services, linking adult education and skills training in the community with education provision in prisons, potential for a new resettlement prison to serve the Greater Manchester area, and so on. But of course, that's not where it's going to end, David. And it seems to me an incredible development if what we're talking about is justice devolution, because where does that end? Does that end up with devolution of the law? And we find law being made, and of course I'm talking about statutory law being made in city-states and city regions. So we no longer have a common law. Is that what this is about? That's what it looks like to me.
And me, I mean, obviously in Scotland we have a different legal system, so it was an easy first pass. And in fact, the Scottish Government has stopped making law. We're not doing that anymore. We're too busy with other things. But nonetheless, yes, devolution of the legal system seems a very threatening move. If your rights change and can be changed by local government as well as national government, does that make you safer? Don't think it does. We used to get away quite well with the common law, where everybody standing on their own 2 feet knew what the law was and was prepared to defend it.
Absolutely. And let's not end there, because of course the continuing moves to create city-states, real city-states. This is David Lammy MP, who's the MP for Tottenham, writing in the Evening Standard a couple of days ago. London must look to be a city-state if hard Brexit goes ahead. He says the capital's future is a thriving economic powerhouse, depends on being open to the rest of the world. Last week, Nicola Sturgeon, so the Scottish are being used as the excuse. Last week, Nicola Sturgeon stole the headlines by firing the starting gun on another Scottish independence referendum. Sturgeon complained that the government has ignored the wishes and interests of Scotland, leaving her with no choice but to push for independence. London's economy is double the size of Scotland's, and there are almost twice as many people living in London as Scotland. So why have the capital's interests been completely sidelined, and why isn't London's voice being heard? And so it goes on. So he's calling for the establishment of a city-state. The case for a London city-state has never been stronger. And of course, this is not just his position. This is not just the position of people in local government and cities and city regions in the UK. This is government policy, and it's being pushed through as usual by, or pushed to the government as usual by the typical NGO think tank sector. The Future Cities dialogue going on at the moment. Dialogue begins about what our cities will look like in 2040 and stresses need for infrastructure and getting smarter and all these kinds of things. And they're dressing this up as smart cities. But we're looking, as we've said many times, David, at a fundamental change in the relationship between us as individuals and our governance and the type of governance that we have. And, you know, devolution of justice, one example of that, but an extremely dangerous trend. This is the plan for Britain, the complete breakup of it as a nation. And to be honest, to sort of bring the program to the end, it seems to me that every community in this country, no matter what religion, color, creed they happen to be, should be recognizing the dangers that we're facing here and working together to sort of reverse this trend.
We'll no longer be a nation. And that's going to be the last building block of identity to be removed. Family, church, your employer, but eventually you'll no longer have any identity in your nation either. You have Nicola Sturgeon's talking about inviting Scotland's not full. She's inviting all the English people who want to build a progressive, practical socialist utopia to come and live in Scotland, presumably before the cut-off date for being eligible to vote in the next independence referendum. And you've got the case of London, which is now an international city. It's not actually really an English city anymore. And I suspect we're going to see that all across Europe. You're going to see it in Cologne, you're going to see it in Paris. And there's going to be a great deal lost as a result. These cities were built by individual nations and had the character of those nations cemented into them. And if you internationalize them and you bring in people who have no particular identity or affiliation with the place, then I would have thought there's something very fundamentally changed about the places that you create.
Absolutely. And let's remind people that, of course, at the end of 2016, October, I think it was the inaugural Global Parliament of Mayors. This is clearly something which a certain section of global governance sees as the future. Creation of what? Some kind of pan-national globalist governance model that we haven't seen before. We don't even entirely understand what form of governance it's going to be.
And it's been done to us. And that's why we have to get out there. We have to talk to our fellow man. We have to build bridges to people in different communities. And we have to understand what's happening and start to push back. And we push back by asking the right questions. We push back with information. We push back with knowledge. We do have the internet. And we've also got the ability to talk to one another and be peaceful and show a bit of love and care for a fellow man. And we fight it one day at a time that way.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, well, thanks. That brings us to the end. David, just briefly, your talk with Gilad Atzmon is next week, I believe.
Yes, it's on Thursday at 7 p.m. That's the 30th. It's in the Cabana in Seawood Street in Glasgow. And I hope people listening can make it along and join us there. And it should be very interesting. I think we're going to have a large and diverse and typically Glaswegian audience. There'll be a long Q&A. It's going to be an absolute hoot. Okay, thank you, David, and thanks to Abby Reardon for joining us as well.
thank you for watching, and we'll be back as usual 1 p.m. on Monday. Have a good weekend, and we'll see you then. Bye-bye.